Then, before going on with the rest of the text, I wanted to say a few words about visualizing, because the word can also be a little bit misleading. I think when we hear visualizing, at least in Portuguese, we connect immediately to the idea that we have to see. Okay? Yeah, in a certain sense, of course. But then it all becomes very sort of brain oriented, because since it's not a very natural or it's an image that we don't know so well, then you will be, is he white? How many hands? And how is the color of this? And Tibetans don't have that problem. They are much simpler, but for us it's complicated. So perhaps it helps. I think for me it helped a lot to understand that when we speak of visualizing, it's not only seeing. It's not mainly seeing. It's mainly sensing. I don't know if it's the right word, but feeling. Feeling the presence. So, like, for instance, if you are in front of a fire and you close your eyes, you don't see the fire, but you still feel the warmth, right? So the idea is, even if you had your eyes closed and someone entered the room, even not by noise, but if he sat quietly in a place, you probably would sense after a while the presence of that person. So even if you can't see Chenrezig, which will probably be the case, you still can sense that presence, and that is the most important thing. So we Westerners tend to be all tangled up with this idea that I have to, see it, and then we try, and then once we get the hands right, but then we don't have the feet, and then we have the head, but then we don't have the lotus, and we are struggling with that, and finally we sort of miss out the most important part, which is to feel the radiation of compassion, of the enlightened presence of Chenrezig, with which we are supposed to tune up, and not necessarily with the form. So if it comes, it's very good, but if it doesn't, we should sort of relax. Actually, most of the time, instead of relaxing, we sort of grow tenser and tenser because we can't see it. So trying really very hard to see, and the harder we try, the least we feel, So I think the main idea is to relax, be open, At a certain point, you are so relaxed and so open that perhaps the image will come naturally. But if it doesn't, you just relax and try to feel, try to imagine how it would feel if Chenrezig was actually sitting in the same room as you are. And if you have difficulty imagining what it would feel, you try to remember how it felt, or imagine how it would feel if you're sitting in the same room as the Dalai Lama or Rinpoche, or you can connect with whatever has in the past, or make you feel like that, or how you imagine it would feel like, and then from feeling, do the practice, not by struggling in your mind to be able to create a perfect image of Chenrezig, which you may achieve or not. But the idea is not to get entangled in that. And I think this is quite important to understand correctly what we're talking about when we say visualize. Actually, visualizing for Tibetans or for Tibetans, it's a whole complete experience. It's not just seeing, it's smelling, it's sensing, you can smell sometimes it also happens to us, isn't it? Sometimes it seems like we feel the smell of incense or the smell of something which might not be there, but we just could smell it, isn't it? So it's something like that. It's a full experience, but the full experience through sensing, feeling, and not necessarily through projecting an image, which might become a new form of thought, and get caught into that. We are a little bit more complicated in this intellectually. We are more educated, more sophisticated than Tibetans in general, I mean the general population. So, but that has also a sort of inconvenient, is that then we start, building up all sorts of thoughts and doubts and hesitations, and that the whole energy and the whole point of the thing sort of slowly vanishes because we are so entangled in all this sort of intellectual speculation. So, this I think is a very important part. If you can't see anything, don't worry. You just sort of relax, open, and try to imagine how it would feel if you were sitting in front of whoever, the Buddha, Dalai Lama, Rinpoche, I mean, whoever has ever made you feel like that. And then you just enjoy. That's the idea, What I was talking about tuning is this. You can evoke that sort of presence, of warm presence and awakened presence, and then just let yourself sort of, like if you were entering a warm bath, warm foam bath. So something like that. And it sort of penetrates you until your soul, until every cell of your body is sort of swimming in an ocean of awareness and compassion. Like you were a sponge in the bottom of the ocean, but a warm ocean, not a cold ocean.
Yeah, in this respect, do you think it helps to read it in English as you do the first time?
Yeah, well, I think the language does not matter so much. I like to read it in Tibetan because I understand also a little bit. So I know more or less what I'm saying if I read it in Tibetan. But I think you can read it in whatever language, but it's important that you understand what you're saying. Not necessarily word by word, but you're supposed to understand what you're supposed to do or what you're supposed to be saying. And especially, it is important that you feel what you're saying. So probably for the most of you, English would help much more than Tibetan to help you feel really deeply what you're saying. Not in this part this part that we have read so far, besides the refuge prayer. It's most a description, so there's not that much feeling into that. It's generally explaining what is in this case it's above our head. But later on, it will be more something that one should try to feel like if it were our own words, not something that someone else put down, but it as coming from us. So, yeah, using a language that you understand, it's better. But Tibetan also might be nice. So you can also change, like one day do like this and the other day do like that, as much as you can, whatever helps you to feel. I think there is an important part of this, which is this creating this wonderful feeling, positive feeling. There is, perhaps I have told you about, or you heard about, there's this institute in America called the Heart Math Institute. They study the heart, but the physical heart, not the spiritual. It's not the spiritual idea, it's the organ, And they sort of investigated it, and They now know that there are neurons in the heart. There is a whole independent nervous system in the heart. So there's truly a reason to talk about intelligence from the heart, because there is a true intelligence there. But then they realized that if you start meditating, because we generally think of the heart as being, very steady and beat in a very regular pace, but it's not the case actually. If you have senses and see, it's quite, the rhythm is not. It's not like a tuk 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 tuk. Okay? It's and the more stressed you are, the more chaotic the pattern is. Then they realized that, if you start doing some shine meditation, like breathing and slowly coming to a more sort of tranquil state of mind, then your heart starts beating in a more regular pace and in a more harmonious pattern. That's first stage. But then if you add to that some very positive feeling, like gratitude or unconditional love, then something else happens. Then all your body and your heart and your breathing and everything starts to create an harmony, and your pattern of beating becomes very harmonious. So they speak about a psychophysical coherent state. So they have even created a small device that you put your finger on, and it will tell you how coherent your heart beating is. They use it for training, especially training not Buddhists, but I mean any sorts of people, and they do a lot of work with soldiers from Iraq War and all these wars the United States are involved with. They have suffered from post-traumatic stress, because the idea is that you can train yourself, because there is a little light that goes on. If you put your finger, there is a place where through your finger it can sort of register your heart beating. And then if you're stressed, it will be red. And then as soon as you calm down, it becomes green. And then once you really develop all these feelings, then it becomes blue. Okay? So you can train yourself to understand what the feeling is of being stressed, of being relaxed, or being in this coherent sort of pattern. I'm talking about this just to tell you that there is a difference between being just calm and having developed this sort of deeper state of coherence that comes through this for instance, in the visualization, comes through sensing this presence and then letting yourself sort of sink into it. Then something different comes that is different from just relaxing or just being present. There's some other quality into it, which is much more soothing, and you really feel like you can, and not only you can, but you feel like melting in sort of way, melting into that presence, into that warm feeling. So that's the idea. Visualizing is that, not necessarily struggling to see something. I often also give this example. Imagine that you, like for instance, there's a place in your house, in your home, where you particularly feel safe and comfortable, and there's a place that when you get home and you sit there or you go there and you feel, it's good to be home, you know what I mean? So if you are somewhere in the world, anywhere, and you start to feel stressed, and someone tells you, just visualize your favorite place in your home. So the idea is not that you can describe it, how many chairs and what's in the wall. It's just that you can recreate the feeling, like if you were sitting there and you're feeling comfortable. you see, that's visualizing, okay? It's sort of creating an atmosphere that you can relate to and that you can use as they use it in psychology also, as an anchor, a positive anchor. And Chenrezig does this. I mean, you can turn Chenrezig into that by practicing. That's the idea. No? You feel like that in your home because you sat there many times. And every time you felt that way. So afterwards you can, anywhere in the world, wherever you are, in a plane, in a boat, in a submarine or anything, you can just imagine that you are in your room and then immediately feel that feeling. So the idea is the same, except of course it's much more than that. But I mean, it's the idea is that whenever you think of Chenrezig, you feel that you are in its presence, then immediately you go, wow. That's it. I mean, that's visualizing, really. It doesn't matter if you can't see it. It's relating to the feeling of it. So, let's move on. So, what until now we were just the text. They always do this. The text describes what is supposed to be, how it is supposed to be there. And then there is a line here saying, think that you and all beings are supplicating with one voice. So in the beginning we said that above our head and the head of all sentient beings. So I think the idea is that we're not alone in this. We can imagine that we are not alone and all beings are with us. And so sort of all together we address Chenrezig. And we say, Lord, white in color, unstained by faults, a perfect Buddha adorning your head. You look upon beings with eyes of compassion, Chenrezig, we prostrate to you. So this is more like a devotion thing. It's sort of inspire ourselves to feel a warm feeling, like when you imagine that you are in front of Dalai Lama or Buddha. I mean, Dalai Lama is someone we have seen in YouTube, and Buddha no. We haven't seen Buddha in YouTube. So, so what I mean is very human. I mean, we can really shake hands, and he's there, and at the same time, we can feel sometimes even through a YouTube video, you can feel that his presence is quite warm and strong and powerful and things like this. So devotion, it's something that is very natural for Tibetan people because they have been brought into that sort of devotion for Chenrezig or for the Buddha is very natural on them. But for us, perhaps it won't be so much. But the idea is that it's this recognition is not only that we acknowledge the presence, but it's sort of relating to it. It's almost like saying, "Oh, it feels so good to be with you." You have to understand, because sometimes the words becomes so formal that we can't relate to it. But imagine that you are sitting with someone that really gives you this warm feeling, and you feel so confident that you feel like nothing can really hurt you, or like if you are totally loved and accepted, like your mother should have done, or something like this, then you have this natural feeling, oh, it's so good to be here. I'm so happy that you are here, and I'm so happy to feel like this. So really, you express it. It's a way to reinforce that first feeling of how great it is to be in presence of Chenrezig, or to be able to feel that way. But then you sort of give it a little bit more emphasis, and you put yourself into a more open state by saying, wow, it is great to feel like this. You're so wonderful. I mean, this presence is so overwhelming, or whatever, Like if you were talking with a friend or something, you can't imagine how great it is. something like that. So enthusiasm and openness. Devotion is really opening up, actually, and melting down in a way. You know, we, because of this problem we have with ego or ego clinging, the idea that we have to defend ourselves from others and from aggression and from all this, we all have lots of barriers around ourselves. Right? If a lot of people meet that they've never been together before, they look at each other, you know, and each one is trying to preserve his own safety and things like this. So all of us go around with lots of layers of, you know, don't get too close, and I don't want to mix with these people, and you know. And then but at the same time, our Buddha nature is sort of craving for closeness and craving for opening, and so we are sort of caught into this paradox. In one way, we are very tense and very, you know, sort of trying not to get too close, but at the same time, that's the only thing we want, really deeply. And you can feel this, because when you talk for a bunch of people that you don't know, they don't know you, and they don't know each other, you know, you suddenly get like what I generally do. And everybody is a bit suspicious and a bit, you know, in his thing. But at the same time, as soon as you start and you say some sort of joke, and then everybody laughs, and they start looking at each other, you know, and it starts melting, you know, and after a while there is a warm feeling. And people really are so happy when they get to that point, that you really understand that even though they sort of protect themselves, growing some sort of deep walls around, and they are craving for this to just melt down. So devotion is, and one of the first qualities of a teacher is to be able to melt down that very quickly, you know, just. And I remember reading in a book, I think it's The Art of Happiness of the Dalai Lama, you know. It was written by an American psychiatrist. Yeah, you understood. Psychiatrist. Who does a few interviews with the Dalai Lama, asks him some sort of questions and things like this, and then he wrote the book. But he's talking about, he had several meetings with His Holiness, and it always happened in a hotel when he was staying in America, and it went on for a few years. Then he's talking about once His Holiness had just come to one American city. I can't remember which town it was, but anyway, a big city. And the day before, he had this meeting organized long time ago with His Holiness. But the night before, he was invited to some mundane meeting or cocktail or something like this. And then he was introduced to a couple who were very rich people, and they were insufferably arrogant, and, you know, almost didn't, you know, smile or so, like this. And he thought to himself, oh, these people are awful, you know. So, then just happened like that. Next day, he was waiting at the entrance of the door, in the corridor, in front of the door of His Holiness, and someone came out. He was on time, and the secretary came outside and said, "You have to wait for just a few minutes because His Holiness is a bit late." You know, he said, "Yeah, no problem." So he sat down and he waited, and suddenly, you know, to his great surprise, there was this couple coming out, the same couple of the day before. You know, they were coming out from. They had been with the Dalai Lama, and they were completely in tears, you know, so moved. And he said, this was a big teaching for me, you know, because these people that seem so closed, so, you know, so arrogant, and they were moved by the presence of His Holiness. So I think that's it, you know. This is the main quality of a teacher. He's so authentic, so genuine. He is so embodies this overwhelming and warm presence so much that there is no wall that can resist that. You know, so even the hardest people in the world just melt down. You know, so that's the idea here. It's to make ourselves melt down. And it's okay, there's nobody there. So we're totally safe. Nobody's going to take advantage of us because we are in a softer situation or anything. You just look around, okay, there's no one. Then I can really open myself. And Chenrezig is totally safe. He's never going to take advantage of us. So that's why we repeat this. Maybe the words we wouldn't say it like this. But we have to remember what we are meaning as we say these words. It is so great to be able to open myself up and to be sort of willing to receive all this and receiving it actually, truly, you know. Of course, if we are from another religion, we could do this with Jesus, or we could do this with Mahomet, or we could do this with anyone, because all those great teachers, what they had is that they embodied this basic goodness, whatever we want to call it. So the good thing about it is that you can use it with whatever makes sense or whatever connects with you, because it's all the same in one sense. So this is great. Okay, then once we say it here, it says you should recite this as many times as you can. But I think the idea is that you can repeat this several times. But the idea is as soon as you can recite this long enough to be able to create this sort of feeling of openness. Maybe it might be just once. You don't have to recite it 50 times or something like that. One may be enough. It's just until you feel yourself sort of softening.
The book says 600,000.
Not here. It's the mantra. It's the mantra. Yeah. Well, you can, if you feel like, but it's not. Repetition has a value. Because that's through repetition that we get all these habits, isn't it? Or all the nasty ones, like drinking Coke, smoking cigarettes. First cigarette is, isn't it? But then one gets used. If one can get used to smoking, one can get used to anything, because it's so awful, isn't it? The first one. But then, for many different reasons, and especially because we want to look smart in front of our fellows. So we keep doing it until we finally like it. So strange, huh? How can one like such a thing, you know? I have smoked. I'm not saying this for anyone, but it's true. It's so repeating something is just a way of creating a habit, you know, creating a gesture, and it becomes natural. What we think of ourselves as something natural is just something that we acquired for so long that it became natural. Okay? We think that perhaps hatred is natural because we just have been angry so many times. But if we become compassionate the same number of times, then compassion will become natural. So the idea is that. That's why sometimes in the texts and in these sort of prayers and things like this, it is said you should repeat it this many times. Because the more you repeat it, the more it becomes natural. So spontaneous, we should say. So, then it is said, due to supplicating one-pointedly in that way, one-pointedly, not thinking about you're going to cook next, or who are you calling on the phone after you have finished, or anything like this, just trying to be present. Imagine that you there's been like 20 years you would like to be with the Dalai Lama for 5 minutes. And then you finally manage it. You have to sort of enjoy that moment. We are so crazy that sometimes even then we start thinking about something else, afraid how long it's going to take, or something like that. But so the idea is enjoy, really enjoy. One pointedly is that you're not thinking about something else, you're just enjoying that moment. Light rays stream forth from the body of the Noble One and purify impure karmic appearances and mistaken consciousness. Wow, this is deep. This is deep stuff. So, due to supplicating one-pointedly in that way. So, thanks to this feeling that we have generated by this devotion, by generating this openness and devotion, it's warm, it becomes sort of a magnet. How can I say? You put yourself into a very receptive condition. Devotion is that. It's actually putting oneself in a very receptive state. So because it is receptive, then it sort of attracts. It's like an empty container, and nature naturally will fill it up. So one becomes very receptive, and then stream of light comes from Chenrezig. There is a sort of response. If you become very open, if you are talking with someone and suddenly you become very open, quite likely there will be a response to that. So Chenrezig responds to our state of openness and our state of receptivity. And that response comes in the form of light rays, stream forth from the body of the Noble One. And then those rays, now that's the important part, those rays, like it says here, they purify impure karmic appearances. What does that evoke for you? Does that evoke anything, first of all? Impure karmic perceptions. What's that? Any idea? Cesare.
Oh.
Is it being mistaken?
Yes.
It's being mistaken of what we're suffering from, maybe?
It's very, very, very fundamental, because the idea is that the world we see is our projection, not the world as it is, but the world we see, because we are projecting good, bad, happy, unhappy, healthy, unhealthy, suffering, happiness. Things in themselves have no value, or they're not good or bad in themselves, but we put a certain meaning into whatever we see. So impure karmic perceptions, and this value that we put is very much the expression of our karma, and karma meaning habit. So if my habit is of seeing unhappiness, or projecting unhappiness, so whatever I see is unhappy. I feel unhappy with whatever I see, because I project unhappiness or rejection or resistance, or in everything I see, I come across with. So if I'm like this, then I will feel people are trying to take advantage of me. I will feel that they want to harm me, or and it's not necessarily true, but it's the way I perceive. Yeah.
This is people talk of, they say, oh, you're wearing your rose-coloured glasses. But when they say that, that's like they're saying that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
So what is that about? Because they're wrong. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, it's nobody normally people don't say you are wearing your dark glasses. I mean that means something else. It just went to the sun and then sunglasses. But yeah, well, of course, the idea is not that you wear some sort of sweetened, artificially sweetened version of reality. That's not what I mean.
No, but it's in.
But that's well, people, yeah.
You're so happy. What's wrong with you? Or is that the rose-colored glasses? Whereas with this, they're saying about you have your perception is
tainted.
You're putting on your dark glasses.
Yes, exactly.
So
Your perception is tainted by some sort of negativity, which comes from your habit. That's what they mean by karmic. And karmic impure perception are not only positive against negative, it's just realizing the fact that you are projecting positive and negative onto things. Mm-hmm. So purifying your perceptions is not just turning bad into good, it's just sort of removing good and bad and just seeing things as they are. So with no whatever, without good or bad or all this duality thing. So this is the deepest idea. Of course, you go there through different stages, and in the first stage you just try to purify the densest, darkest, and most uncomfortable projections, and then slowly, gradually you remove everything until all the karmic perceptions, projections are purified. But I think here it's very important for us to understand that this is not only said here, of course, this is one of the main teachings in Buddhism, is that whatever we perceive as good, as good or bad or suffering and happiness and everything, all of this is just our own projection. And it's karmic, which means it depends on previous habits and a certain tendency to see things in a certain way. It might be coming from another life. It is also coming from our youth. It might be coming from our parents because we were imprinted with their own fears and hopes and all this stuff. So through all our experience of life, we have this tendency to, repeat over and over again what we have been acquainted with. So that's what it means. So we have to think that these white rays of light that come from Chenrezig are going to sort of clean all that stuff for us and for all beings. So all these karmic appearances that we now see, the world as we see it is going to be purified. So our perspective of the world is going to be purified. But we don't really know how the world looks like unless through our own eyes, isn't it? People around us might say different things from what we see, but our experience remains ours. We can't experience the world through someone else's experience. We only know our experience. So through opening and become very receptive, we sort of let go a little bit of our own opinion about things, about how we conceptualize things and so on. So whatever the light that comes from Chenrezig now can really remove all that. And we can be purified in this sense. For us, purified quite often we think of purified like becoming good instead of bad, but it's deeper than that. Just purified from it altogether, from good and bad, and try and be able to see things much more as they are, in their sort of natural and.
Is that the essence of emptiness then?
Yeah. So this is important, huh? As we do this and we receive this, of course we can, in the beginning, understand it as like getting rid of all these negative things that, but it goes deep as the time goes by and we practice more and more, it goes into deeper and deeper levels of purification, and you just start seeing things much more in their simplicity, just what it is, instead of, this is so good, or this is so bad, We keep going from one to the other, but then we start relaxing and things start to appear in a more natural and simple way. Okay, so and mistaken consciousness. The way we conceive things. So, when this happens, then the outer world becomes the pure land of Sukhavati. Wow, so that's name, Sukhavati. It means Dewa Chen, sort of great happiness, of great joy.
That's where all the deities hang out, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that what's it called? Is that the name of it?
There are many, there are different names. It depends on which deity. They have sort of their own field of experience, the great land of Sukhavati, I think it's quite evocative, Sukhavati, great happiness, great joy, great enjoyment. Because once we get rid of all this stuff of good and bad and all these karmic things, then everything is just pure joy, just enjoyment, pure enjoyment. Of course, now we can only see it once in a while, because the rest of the time we are afraid, we have fears or hopes or all sorts of things. But if all that subsided, then what would remain was this sort of pure enjoyment, which is also part of our Buddha nature. So once that's it. So the outer world becomes the pure land of Sukhavati. The body, speech, and mind of the inhabitants within become the body, speech, and mind of Chenrezig. So they all the beings around us become equally pure as Chenrezig. As we can sort of recognize in them the same Buddha nature that we recognize in Chenrezig and we recognize in ourselves. So when we say all beings, it's not just the others around me too. So I am also the body, speech, and mind of Chenrezig. Appearances, sounds, and awareness are inseparable from emptiness. So whatever we see, whatever we hear, and whatever thoughts might come to our mind, there is no grasping. Yeah. And while meditating on the meaning of that, recite the mantra as much as you can. That's where 100,000 comes. The mantra is Om Mani Padme Hum Ri. In this case, the mantra of Chenrezig is normally just Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. But here, they have added the seed syllable in the end. So in this sadhana we say Om Mani Padme Hum Ri. Hri. Hri. This is the mantra that is most recited by Tibetans. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. They spend most of their time reciting this, especially once they get to old age. Then they do everything reciting the mantra. They cook, they watch television, they do everything. They're always reciting the mantra. They walk around, and it becomes. I think someone once said, and I thought it was very funny and interesting at the same time. He said, the mantra is a sort of a mental chewing gum. And of course, this is not a Tibetan. It was not a Tibetan who said this, but yeah, because what happens is that we have this sort of discursive thought, thinking, always on, like this voice in our head. When you're watching the Olympic Games or something like this, there's always a guy who is commenting on everything, And this athlete is now 26 and he has done this and this and that, and he never stops talking. So there is one guy like that in here, never stops talking. It goes on and on and on. Have you look at his socks or anything like this? Who has the idea of wearing such clothes? And it goes on and on forever. So the mantra comes as a sort of very interesting replacement for that. So there's still a voice, but instead of keep saying stupid things, it just repeats the mantra, So they say actually a mantra, the word itself means a protection or protection of the mind. Protection in this sense keeps it concentrated, and so it's a sort of dialogue or a sort of voice or a sort of sound that replaces all this discursive thought, especially when you're meditating. But if you can do that all the time, then it would be wonderful. Because then, most of all this thinking would have been replaced by the sound of the mantra, which doesn't mean much, actually. It's just, Om is just a syllable to start with. It's one of the ancient, from India, one of the most ancient syllables. And then Mani is this famous jewel, the wish-fulfilling jewel that we were talking about. And Padma so Om is the white one. Mani is the two sort of greenish. Padma is here. Padme is the Tibetan way of saying it. And Hum. So Padma is lotus. So there are only two words actually in this mantra. One is Mani, which is the wish-fulfilling jewel, and the other one is Padma, which is lotus. And then Hum is a sort of a syllable to close at the end of the mantra. So the mantra it's not like a sentence, It has two words, yes, jewel and lotus, referring to Chenrezig. It's the mantra of Chenrezig, but it's not like a sentence or anything. It is not doing anything, like in a normal sentence. So it's mostly sound, And what you mean? They mean here in the sadhana when they say sound is empty. The mantra also helps us to understand this sort of emptiness of sound. Like I'm talking, and you more or less understand what I mean. But actually, if you didn't understand English at all I would have been doing is making sounds, right? So, but because conventionally we sort of understand ourselves, then you say these sounds have a certain meaning for you because we're talking common language. But the nature of all these sounds are just sound. Okay? So that's what they mean by empty, in the sense that it's just sound. And whatever we can hear is just sound anyway. If whatever sound we hear, like we hear a car on the street, if we relate more to the sound and less to the identification of that sound, we're sort of linking more with the empty nature of that sound instead of the meaning that we have put into it, which creates lots of connotations, positive, negative, and all that stuff. You understand what I mean? It's like if we were newborn babies, all of this would just be sounds, and it wouldn't have much meaning for us. So when we recite the mantra, and we tend to sort of relate more to the empty aspect of these sounds, because it's not meaning something, it's just sound, and we can enjoy this sound. And this sound has effect, because sound is very powerful. Remember, before form, there was sound. Sound is very powerful. You can, if you hear beautiful music or what, you feel immediately moved much quicker than in any other form that you can experience. So sound is really powerful. That's why mantras is very powerful. That's why sometimes also Vajrayana is referred to as Mantrayana, because that's the path. Yana means path, and that's the path, or this is the method that uses mantra as one of the skillful means for transformation. Through sound is like a magic formula, Through sound, open sesame or something like that. Through sound, transformation can happen. So that's the idea. So while you're sort of considering all this, the rays of light coming from Chenrezig, in order to sort of, it's not just an instant. You can sort of remain in this visualization, in this sort of scenario that you have created for a while you recite the mantra. So you try to replace your discursive thoughts by the recitation of mantra, and so you give your mind something to chew upon. Not be silent is very difficult. So you don't have to be silent, but instead of commenting on things that are happening, you just recite the mantra. Okay, so you give your mind something to be occupied. Your thought, something to be occupied with, and then you sort of let yourself melt into this feeling that you are receiving something that purifies you really completely from all this delusive state in which we are so caught in duality that we are always from fear to hope, from angry to happy, and balancing all these sides into a much more peaceful state. So you imagine all these rays of light coming from Chenrezig, and while that happens, we recite the mantra. As long as you feel like. And then, at the end, so once you have finishing reciting the mantra, then there is a sort of end or momentum. This is a nice word. Where you, after all this, then something happens and you suddenly realize that the physical appearance of myself and others is now the body of the noble Chenrezig. So, of course, probably we won't have four arms at that stage or anything like this, but it means that you are less identified with your own form, and you start connecting deeply more with the form of Chenrezig. So, form is something which we identify a lot with, isn't it? We like ourselves or don't. We go to the whole trouble of dyeing the hair and putting makeup and letting your beard grow, or on the other hand shaving every day and this thing. Because why? Because we identify with this. Okay? And from this identification comes a lot of feelings. I feel great, or I feel awful because I have put on some weight, or then I feel great because I lost some weight, and I feel awful because I have white hair, and so on and so forth. And this gives me sort of makes up my sense of personality, of my sense of identity, denser, either positive or negative, because if I don't like myself, it would make me feel denser anyway. I hate myself, for instance. I hate myself. I have to exist to be able to hate myself. So the more I hate myself, the more I exist, and I'm sure I exist. You understand? So through all this, one is able to sort of let go of that identification, and then we relate more to our true nature, and then we become Chenrezig. We have become Chenrezig through all of this. So not only myself, but all the others. So that there is no more point in arguing, because we are all Chenrezigs. I look to everybody and they all became Chenrezig. So we are all the same, and we won't be able to argue about anything, because there's no no ground for that. Okay? Then, sounds are the melody of the 6 syllables. It's what we have said before. You know, you relate more to the empty nature of sound. It's just sound. It might be very helpful. Let's say someone criticizes you. Why should I get, depressed because someone just uttered a few sounds? What's that after all? Just blah, 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 blah. Okay, what about it? What ground to go home and be depressed for 2 weeks? Oh, he's sad. Blah, 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 blah. There's no point. If and then again, if he praises me, then I'm very happy, and I go home and say, yeah, good. I put a lot of likes in the Facebook and things like this. But again, just sound, okay? So this helps. Yeah, the idea is not just doing this as an exercise, like going and have a good running or swimming or anything. This is sort of a training to, in everyday situation, whenever someone is nasty, we see through that nastiness. That Chenrezig is somewhere over there in the bottom, like behind the screen, behind all that nastiness. Chenrezig is there somewhere, because at some point in this part, you came to understand that despite all appearances, our nature is Chenrezig. Then someone says something nasty, but it's just empty sound, so it's okay. And then thoughts are the expense of great wisdom, which means whatever you think, you don't beat yourself up. You just let go. That's the most difficult part. Compared to the rest, is the most difficult. Because, in fact, the only power thoughts have over us is the power we give them. Because by giving them power, we allow them to come back and again and again and again until we feel completely depressed or completely angry. Or if we just let them go in the first place, they wouldn't affect us. That's the top level, actually. It's not transforming or sweating to be able to transform a negative thought into a positive one. It's just don't care. Let go. And that's what they say in the teachings, There's a Tibetan expression, Rangsha Rangdrol, means whatever comes, it comes through his own accord. But then it also dissolves without me having to do anything about it. Yeah, of course, we're not at that stage. Normally, whenever something comes up, then we either we are very excited or are very afraid, and then lots of things happening. So that's why we have to train. And once we train like this, we allow ourselves to, at least for a few moments, just allow the thoughts to come, and then don't do anything about it. Just allow them to subside. Then you realize that actually there's no need to do anything about it. You just let them come and let them go. Any emotion, I recently read somewhere that scientific, so it has the seal of truth, that they come to the conclusion that any sort of emotion, even in the physical sense, like all these substances and like adrenaline or something like this, it only takes 90 seconds from the moment he is born until the moment it disappears completely from our system. 90 seconds. Doesn't feel like that, does it? It feels like it stays forever. Actually, because we sort of reenact it over and over and over. So it can stay for days. Emotions don't stay for days. They can stay for a while, but then if we don't do anything, normally what happens is that when it starts subsiding, then we get another good reason to feel it. Say, it was really awful to say that to me. And then, it was almost subsiding, but then we realize, I was so right and he was so wrong. And then it goes again, we go, in
it's
this.
It's like an addiction to it.
It's an addiction, really. So that's why it is not easy to just let the thoughts come and then let them go, because we are addicted to all these sort of emotions.
Do you think people with severe mental health issues like psychopaths, they say that, I don't know, or people that are bipolar or depressed, do you think that's because they keep picking it up?
Yeah.
Dragging it along with them. It's pretty...
I mean, we are all a little bit psychopaths. Ego is crazy. But then there are degrees, of course. There are functional egos and dysfunctional ones. Ego is dysfunctional anyway, but then there are degrees. We can more or less function in the world, and we don't talk to ourselves in the tube, or only mentally, not loudly. But then there are people. Then if you go to a certain extent, then you can get completely mad, and totally dysfunctional. But the principle is the same. Is just you don't let go, and so you sort of go round in this. How you say these wheels for the rice, for the rat? Yeah, something like that, And every morning we'd get up and go to our.
So there must be, I guess, for somebody like with those issues, there must be like a little tiny switch. Because with like people who've got bipolar,
the switch is awareness.
So
the switch is awareness.
And they can go on for years. Like they call them an episode or something.
Yeah. But the only way to get out of that is just by being aware, just aware. What am I doing here, What am I doing to myself? I mean, I don't have to do this. I'm not obliged to go on like this. I can get out, And then we do, because once we are totally aware, when we become aware of addiction, that's the first step to getting out of it, It's very common, I think the first symptom of addiction is when people say, oh no, I'm not addicted. I can stop anytime,
I just don't want to.
Because they can't.
Yeah, but I'm not going out because I can go out anytime. That's what they say,
Yeah.
But then comes another realization when we finally acknowledge that we are addicted. Yeah, I am. So I have to do something. And then it's then that we do something, and we can do something.
Mm-hmm.
But we first have to acknowledge our addiction. So it's a bit like that, Here too. So that recognizing our addiction is what makes us start practicing, It's because we recognize, and then we start looking for something that might help us to get out of it. And all of this, in a sense, is just creating momentum for, at some point, at the end of the most important part is the end, is these 3 verses that we were just telling about. All the rest is just to get here, to get to this point. So you sort of build up. You're building up something, a sort of energy field, or also a vision field that you're building up by reciting the mantra. And reciting the mantra is often seen as a wheel, like a dynamo. If you want to create electricity, you make something go round and round and round, and quicker and quicker and quicker. And sometimes you do see the syllables. That's why there's prayer wheels, and it's creating this rhythm, creates a sort of energy that builds up. And then when you are at the top of this energy, then suddenly everything becomes much more clear, and and you suddenly realize this. And the text helps us, because it sort of directs us to what we should be seeing, or what you can see at that stage. So the whole, whatever is previous is just to create this sort of, building up this.
Because they have those big walls of those wheels, don't they? They have to all walk along. I was thinking, what's that all about then?
Sometimes visualization includes
Yeah.
that part. You can see the mantra turn around the seed syllable or something like this, but it's the way of creating energy. So reciting the mantra creates this
There's a
energy.
little hand one as well.
Yeah.
Little tiny, well, I've got a little tiny one. That's cool. Cool.
Well, that's the idea. So once we have reached this point, we just sort of stay in a calm state of mind, contemplating this. Yeah, we hear the sounds and we realize it's just sounds. We see the appearances and we realize that they are, empty by nature, or they're just appearances or illusions or something like this. And then we understand that all our thoughts are all so as empty as the sounds may be empty, because finally, what is a thought? What is it? I'm not expecting you to answer. There is no real answer to that. But it's just contemplating, because we take it for granted. There's some thought coming and we suddenly, some thought says, you should get up and get a glass of water. And then you immediately obey. You get up and take a glass of water. But wait a minute, what is that? What does that mean, actually? What is the power of this? Just comes through my mind. And if I wait enough, it will probably just vanish. Yeah. So, this moment is a good moment to observe and sort of stay still and let this sort of sink in, so that it becomes part of our experience afterwards. You understand what I mean? In day-to-day life, then all of this has slowly becomes part of us. So, as I was saying, if someone insults us or if someone, compliments us or anything, it will have much less impact in us. We will smile, which is always a very good response in both cases. You just smile and say, okay, and then that's it. It's empty sound.
I wondered if, maybe I misunderstood. There was something here about light coming forth, and
It is above the.
so the light coming forth, and I was thinking of light being emitted from ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a meeting of that.
Mm-hmm.
But where you think it was, maybe I misunderstood.
No, it's true. It
seems
says,
as
yeah.
though it's coming externally.
Mm-hmm.
But I wondered about the meeting point of light to light.
It doesn't come from us. It comes from Chenrezig and it dissolves in us.
But then it
Dissolves in us.
Because we're also thinking about our own compassion,
Yeah.
and that is an emitting of our light. No?
Yes. Well, there are several stages, possible stages in these sadhanas. One first stage, we see the deity outside ourselves, like in a mirror, actually. But because we are not able to see our own face if we don't have a mirror, it's a little bit like this symbol. When we're starting, we are not very often able to recognize our own basic intrinsic goodness nature. So we have to see it through someone else's. So we start with something outside. And then it slowly, and we are ordinary, and we have a deity which is perfect and, spotless and all this in front of us. Because we feel we are so imperfect that you feel there is a distance. And then the more you practice, then the less difference there is. So at a certain point, you see yourself as Chenrezig, and Chenrezig in front of you. And then later on, there is no Chenrezig in front of you. You are just Chenrezig yourself. But you have to go through stages. Yeah. It's much quicker than you might think. Because sometimes the sadhana starts immediately with you becoming the deity. And people sometimes have difficulty relating with that because they feel so imperfect. They feel almost like it's like what do you say, sacrilege?
Or impersonate.
You know, like you see this?
Sacrilege.
Sacrilege to see yourself as Chenrezig, because you feel you are so nasty and so imperfect and so, you know, all of this. So you have to go through stages. You have to see Chenrezig outside and you as an ordinary person, imperfect and with all these defaults, and you think you have, or you think you are. And then suddenly, as you go and go and go, this goodness starts, you know, growing from inside. And then you don't see that much difference, because you know, of course you may not be perfect, but you know that you have this perfect nature in yourself, so it becomes easier and easier. Yeah. But then Chenrezig might be in front of you, or as it is said here, above your head. But then if he is in front of you, the rays will come directly, like, you know, frontally. And if he is above your head, it will just sort of come down, and like if it was watery or something, luminous water coming down, and, you know, through entering your body, through every pore of your skin, like soaking really. And it all, you know, becomes very, very radiant and very beautiful, and everything else just goes.
That's interesting, because I've certainly seen different teachings on at which point in the sadhana do you dissolve Chenrezig into you, whether you've already done it by the time you say Om Mani Padme Hum, or whether it's like a consequence of calling out Om Mani Padme Hum many, many times. I think when Gotuku does it at the after Om Mani Padme Hum, isn't it?
Probably.
Yeah.
I don't remember now. It's been a while I've not read the book, but yeah.
With that idea of evoking the name of Chenrezig, his own name, kind of
Yeah.
thing. But that's I've been taught both ways. And, you know, at first to dissolve Chenrezig before you say Om Mani Padme Hum, like to get to imagine yourself that quite early on was quite, did feel just feel different, I have to say. To say it as Chenrezig, to say the magic as Chenrezig, imagine to Chenrezig, versus to say it as if to call Chenrezig to you, it's quite a different feeling actually. I think.
Well, I have this perhaps not very traditional, you know, like Rinpoche usually said, I shouldn't say this. That's when everybody gets very interested. I think he does it on purpose, you know. When he's going to be a little bit cheeky, you know, he starts smiling a little bit, and then he says, "Okay, I shouldn't say this," and then everybody, you know, is all ears. But I really feel like this, and I have heard it also. I'm not just, you know, inventing. Sadhanas are the sort of basic script, but then you have to feel them from inside. So you can start it becoming Chenrezig in the beginning, in the middle, after visualization, after mantra, before mantra, at the end, whenever. And even at some point, you even the same person in different days will do it differently, because that's how it feels. It is supposed to transform you. So in order for it to be a transformative tool, it has to be felt. Yeah, because it's experience that transforms us, not knowledge. Even though knowledge is important, but it's not through knowledge that we transform ourselves. It's through experience. Experience is the sort of, real thing. So the thing here, and in all sadhanas, the important thing is how I feel, how it becomes an experience, and that's what transforms me. So I'm very flexible with this, and of course there are probably hundreds of different explanations, because there are hundreds of different ways one can do this practice. And so whenever you feel ready, so perhaps in the beginning you won't even be able to feel yourself like Chenrezig, not even at the end. But then with time, you know, it will become different.
Thank you.
So then we rest a little. After we say thoughts are the expense of great wisdom, we rest a little. It's like, woo, yeah, and we stay there. So here we just, everything sort of dissolves. All that we might have been doing or thinking or wishing or whatever, it's just everything comes to a very peaceful, because in the end, all that remains is just our empty nature, which, and the feeling of that empty nature is noble heart. So that's all that remains. You just stay there for a while. Normally it doesn't last much. So they usually say whenever thoughts come back, I mean if they ever stopped, whenever you start having thoughts again, then you sort of come back and do the dedication. There are more complex sadhanas which have different stages for coming back and all this, but in his is very simple. You let yourself dissolve everything and remain in that simplicity. Sometimes they say it's like a pure sky without clouds. So imagine sort of space, luminous space, but feeling very warm. It's not empty. Yeah, emptiness is also a misleading word, because it feels very cold when you say, you go into an empty place and the first feeling is, ugh, isn't it? So emptiness is not always, it can be misleading. Emptiness is, in this sense, it's very spacious, very open. But then the feeling of this particular sort of emptiness is warm, is warm-heartedness, is this sort of, I like this expression. It was used by a Lama that I know, and that's my favorite expression. He used this expression, he said, it's like unbearable tenderness. That means something, doesn't it? When you feel so moved that it's almost unbearable, it's like your heart is not big enough to contain it. It's just sort of, unbearable, really. Wow, so I feel really, it's not a suffering, it's just, it's too much. It's really very strong tenderness. Everything is felt, sort of felt in that way, Wherever I look, I feel moved. If I walk, lightly. You know what I mean? Yeah, we have felt that many times, but it just goes, So here it stays for a while, and then we do the dedication. Dedication is very important because there are two important. The rest also is very important, but the setting our intention in the beginning, and then concluding in the end with a dedication are two important moments in this. It's sort of preparation and conclusion, and there is the main part, of course, but preparation and conclusion are very important. Because as we said yesterday in London, when we were talking about karma and the different stages of one action, it is said that intention and rejoicing in the end or regretting if it's something else, are two very important moments in the impact, in the karma created by one action. So that's why we always do a dedication in the end in the Buddhist practice, because it's a way of putting a sort of seal, we put there and it stays there, It has been, my intention was this, and at the end it's a sort of reaffirming my initial intention and saying, I'm so glad. And I'm so glad, and then I that energy I sort of dedicated to enlightenment. So if I ever had forgotten in between, I dedicated. So it sort of piles up, What can I say? If let's say you got out of your home in the morning and you were walking, and then you saw something that moved you or put you very happy or something like this. And then so you're very happy and you're walking on the street, and then suddenly something terrible happens. You know, you see someone being run over by a car or something. So your initial good feeling is destroyed and vanished by whatever the energy of that nasty thing that you saw. So it happens that if you practice something like this and you didn't dedicate it, so this good feeling could be easily destroyed by something else, because it's the nature of things. If you get angry with someone, then this would just go to rubbish, whatever you have done. So once you have put dedication, it doesn't mean that you won't feel bad after an hour or two because something else happened, but the energy created by that will not dissolve. It will sort of it's piling up somewhere. So it's sort of, it's a bank. It's a sort of energy bank. And you are dedicating it for a special cause. So you have put it in a special account. That is called enlightenment. So, so you have interests running. They say in the teachings that, if you have good karma, actually, or merit, as they say, it's a bit different. Because good karma is just result of positive actions. Merit is the result of positive actions which have been dedicated to enlightenment, so it's different. It doesn't only produce good circumstances, it produces enlightenment. So it's different, it's spiritual, it has a spiritual value, it's not just, getting rich or something like that. So, but they say if you have good merit, if you have accumulated merit, then it will sort of, it piles up by itself, sort of, like putting money into it gives interest. It's investing your money. Let's be materialistic. And that's it. I mean, and the dedication is by the merit of, may we quickly accomplish Chenrezig and establish every being without exception in that state. So, sort of is for us and others. Okay. So before we take a break, yes, I've designed the re.
Maybe you could